I'm not going to spend the time I've got this evening making the case for economic justice. It's a case that is very well understood here in Wales, and it is, as you've heard, very well articulated in the excellent IPPR report, Prosperity and Justice. I was explaining to Tom that I stole a copy of the report off somebody else's desk as I was walking through where the Welsh Government is situated in T Howell. In my job, the chance of reading a whole report is very rare indeed. But this one, as I read the start of it, I was drawn into the whole report and read it from cover to cover. And those of you who will be coming across it for the first time tonight, I really do recommend it to you, not just as a compelling account of the challenges that face us as a nation, but a compellingly well-written document that draws you on through the arguments and to the conclusion that you heard Tom read out. Now, normally when I'm talking on platforms in Wales about the economy, I'm focusing on austerity and on Brexit. But for tonight, I think I'll simply say that austerity and Brexit simply but sharply intensify the failings of the 40-year-long neoliberal project here in the United Kingdom. A neoliberal project which has had the deliberate and intentional pursuit of inequality at its heart. Not, as its proponents will often tell you, some regrettable but unavoidable byproduct of the necessary actions that they have taken. The neoliberal agenda requires inequality. It requires it to be, in their lexicon, the spur to economic activity amongst the majority of the UK citizenry. Now, at the heart of the Welsh Government lies exactly the opposite ambition. Our ambition is to create a more equal Wales. And that ambition is not simply the Welsh Government's ambition, but crucially, it is the ambition of the National Assembly for Wales, because a more equal Wales is the unifying goal of that most radical piece of legislation, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And those of you who know it will know that the Act requires us to judge the decisions we take today, not simply against the immediate and urgent pressures that we face, but against the long-term impacts that those decisions have on the prospects of those who will come after those who make today's decisions and well into the future. Now, it's an act which I'm really pleased to see the Shadow Cabinet, Labour's Shadow Cabinet last week, commit to putting into the legislative programme of the next UK Labour government, to make that act and the goals it sets out and the obligations it puts on decision makers, not simply a Wales set of obligations, but something that will animate the legislative programme and the administrative actions of that next Labour government at the UK level too. And what the Act does, I think, is to recognise here in Wales that the pursuit of equality erodes distinctions and creates connections between economic, social and environmental justice as those impact in the lives of citizens here in Wales. Now, the case for greater equality, you've already heard it. I'm not going to dwell on it. We know that more equal societies do better economically, enjoy better health, and have less crime, less violent crime, and more crucially, maybe of all, less fear of crime. Because unequal societies, sharply unequal societies, teach you in that Thatcherite way always to suspect your neighbour, always to believe that the only way in which you can make your way in life is to use your sharp elbows to press down on the shoulders of others in order to elevate yourself. Whereas equal societies teach you exactly the opposite lesson. They teach you that the things that matter to you and matter to your family and to the place that you live are most likely of all to be the things that matter to others who live nearby, that their ambitions and their interests are closely aligned with your ambitions and your interests too. And out of that, you create the bonds of social solidarity. And that's what more equal societies create, and that's why we are, as part of the goals of the Act, a more prosperous Wales, a healthier Wales, a globally responsible Wales. That's why the pursuit of a more equal Wales runs as the unifying thread throughout the Act. Now, what I'm going to do this evening is to focus briefly on three practical ways in which here in Wales we are discharging those ambitions in pursuit of the sort of new economic settlement that the IPPR report sets out. And they are just three contributions from the practical actions of a government that shares the underlying analysis of that report, and certainly the ambition to bring together both a fairer society on the basis that fairness creates strength. Fairness creates strength in the economy, creates a stronger society, and creates a better opportunity for us to make sure that while we are lucky enough to have the opportunity of making decisions in this beautiful place that is Wales, but in a fragile planet, that we make those environmental decisions that leave our world stronger for those who will come after us. So the first thing that I want to emphasise is that here in Wales we continue to draw on our great history of collective action to solve common problems. Many of you will know what R.H. Tawney said in his great book Equality. Collective expenditure makes possible results which would be unattainable were an identical sum distributed without adjustment in fractional additions to individual incomes. And just as collective expenditure leads to collective benefits, so collective endeavour makes possible results that individual efforts can never achieve. And that is why, in the legislative programme that I announced on the floor of the National Assembly on Tuesday, the legislative programme that will take us through the rest of this Assembly term, I placed such an emphasis on our determination to put a social partnership bill on the statute book here in Wales. Now, social partnership is a way of doing business that we have developed over a decade and more. It's a way in which we tackle those great social problems that face us by bringing together around the same table both the Welsh Government, employers and trades unions, and to do the hard business, the really hard business of thrashing out agreements between us through which we can take actions that address those problems. Now, we want to put that social partnership model that we think has served us very well on a statutory basis here in Wales. And at the heart of that statutory basis will be the pursuit of fair work, and the pursuit of fair work, we believe, is fundamentally best pursued through the extension of collective bargaining in the workplace. And as Tom said to you, this is not some idiosyncratic or wildly radical notion. It is a notion endorsed in successive reports from the World Bank, from the IMF, from the ILO, all those organizations that have looked at where fairer economies exist, where there is greater sharing of the resources that collectively we produce through the economy we have, but which are so unfairly shared. Collective bargaining is at the heart of the way that greater fairness in the workplace can be pursued. And not simply greater fairness in the workplace, but greater balance in the economy that we create. The Basque Country is one of the key regional partners that Wales has in the European Union. In the 1980s, the Basque Country had GDP that was 70% of the European Union average, 30 percentage points below the EU average. Today, the Basque Country has GDP at 130% of the EU average. It's 30 percentage points above in 2019 rather than 30 percentage points below. In terms of how do we create the sort of fairer economic futures that we want to see here in Wales, collective action lies at the heart of our approach, and we will do more in that area through our social partnership legislation. Secondly, I think that we are embarked on a new understanding of the necessity of using the power of public investment to create a wider set of returns for the public. I don't think it's unfair to say that for quite a while in the devolved era, the way in which Welsh governments have used the power of public investment has been narrowly focused on the specific purpose for which that investment was being made. So if we invested in a company, it was because we wanted a return in terms of jobs created. If we invested capital in creating a school, we focused narrowly on what that school itself would need. And if we gave a grant to a third sector organisation in mental health, let us say, then it was the mental health service narrowly that we focused on when that grant was awarded. Now I think we understand that right across that range of ways in which governments invest, we have to create a wider set of social value returns for the investment that we make. So just to take the economic one for you, we have now in Wales a new economic contract. And the economic contract says that when we make an investment on behalf of the public in a business here in Wales, then that business has a responsibility that goes wider than simply the interests of the business itself. Public investment with a social purpose. The taxpayer is investing in that company, and we say to that company, if you want that investment, and we want to make that investment, then we will expect you to make a return to the public in terms of fair work, in terms of decarbonisation, in terms of investment in the skills of people who are in that workplace, in terms of the occupational health service, the mental health and well-being of that workforce as well. And that is what I mean by a wider set of public values that our investment needs to drive out. And that is true not simply in the economy, but as I say, in the way that we deliver capital expenditure. When we create a school, we should be sure that alongside the school, there is an active travel plan to make sure that students at that school do not need to be driven by their parents to the school gate. We should, when the school is being built, have planned into the capital expenditure the biodiversity contribution that that school can produce. We should have planned from the start that there will be water available to students at that school freely and by turning on a tap rather than needing to be purchased and brought in a plastic bottle. These are the wider benefits that I think traditional ways of thinking about government expenditure have tended to marginalise, and which in Wales, as we think about the power of public investment in our economy and in our society, we will want to put back at the heart of the way in which those expenditures are made. And thirdly, in these practical examples of the way in which governments can act to create economic justice, and here in Wales we are reinventing the repertoire of cash equivalent services that collective action through government produces. The social wage, as one of my political heroes, Barbara Castle, would have said. Those things that government can do that release money in the pockets of the poorest families in our nation. And this has been, I believe, one of the hidden stories of the whole of the devolution period, because successive governments have pursued this strategy here in Wales. The very first Assembly term saw the abolition of charges for going to museums and galleries here in Wales. The second Assembly abolished prescription charges and introduced free breakfasts in our primary schools. The third Assembly abolished car parking charges in our hospitals. The fourth Assembly decided that when the social fund and council tax benefit was ripped up across our border, that we would preserve both of those policies here in Wales. Each of these things releases money in the pockets of the poorest citizen that otherwise they would have to devote for those purposes. So a family on benefits in Wales pays no council tax at all. On average across our border, a family, the poorest families in England, will be paying £200 a year now towards the council tax, and in many parts of England they will be paying far more out of their benefits that have been frozen since the year 2015. That's £5 every week in the pocket of that family that, as a result of the social wage approach we've taken in Wales, is released for other purposes. And sometimes when I speak in front of audiences, I see people thinking, £5 a week, what's the point of that? Well, £5 at the end of the week is food on the table of the families that I see every week in my surgery who come through the door to say that they do not know how they will be eating at the end of that week. And cumulatively, the things that I have just outlined, of course, amount to far more than £5 a week. And even in this fifth Assembly, when resources are squeezed in a way that we have never seen for 200 years, we have the most generous childcare offer anywhere in the United Kingdom, where 82% of families tell us that they are better off every week as a result of the childcare offer that we have put in place, where we have the only national holiday hunger scheme anywhere in the United Kingdom, so that those children who don't have a free school meal and don't have a free breakfast during those long weeks of summer holidays do have access to those things on a universal, Wales-wide basis, and where we have reinvented the school uniform grant in this Assembly term so that it does far more than simply support families with the cost of the school uniform itself. And I just want to give you one practical example of what this reinvention can mean in addressing economic justice issues for those people who are on the sharpest receiving end of the pressures that the IPPR report outlines. So our new school uniform grant, if you have a child in year 3 and year 7 in Wales, that will give you £325 a year in your pocket, but otherwise you would have had to pay for those school-based purposes. Imagine that you decide to use £5 a week of that £325 £325 to become a member of a pantry club. Pantry clubs, church action on poverty inspired, beginning to be created here in Wales. They are membership organisations. You pay £5 a week to join that organisation, and that organisation entitles you to up to around £25 or £30 worth of food from that cooperative club every week. The £5 that you have used from the £325 you have as a result of the Welsh Government's decision drives £1,500 worth of purchasing power in the pocket of that family. Though that is the sort of imaginative, creative and reinvented sense of cash equivalent services that I think we are trying to create here in Wales as part of a recapturing of that sense of civic municipal socialism that was alive, well and practiced widely in South Wales communities, particularly within the lifetimes of people who are still with us today. So finally, it is, I've always thought, socialism that teaches us to have optimism, that the arc of history does in the end bend to justice, but the courage to know that it does not do so without a struggle, that nothing has ever been won for progressive causes or working people without the determination to take the action that wins those rewards. And that struggle to return to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is not a struggle simply for today, but it is a struggle to create the conditions which lead to better tomorrows. That, I think, is what lies at the heart of the prescription that the IPPR's report sets out for us. And here in Wales, we struggle every day in the difficult circumstances we face to play our part in that practical way to create economic, social and environmental justice in the lives of Welsh citizens. Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr.